2 minutes to start.
The worst thing that happens, like, if they have a
The Big A 50K is very much a grassroots race, and I remember when I found it a year and a half ago when I was looking for an ultra to do that spring, and I said, oh, this is kind of my thing. There's no bibs, there's no medals, there's no big to-do or anything. In fact, the only money you pay is a donation to the Conservation Commission up there.
This is my favorite scene is the pre-race. Everyone feeling good. Big A starts at the top of the mountain, which I thought was kind of fun and unique.
Everyone here is an ambassador. There's other people who are going to be here running around. As you go by, people don't, mow them down. You do not have right of way. If you see litter on the ground, put it in your pocket, please. We have trash cans here. We want everyone to feel that trail runners are a positive part of the mountain.
Before the Big A 50K, the longest race I had ever run, I'd run several half marathons.
The way the trail's marked is we have flags. They're hanging from trees. If you run for more than 2 minutes, you don't see a flag, you are off course. Okay?
This is a race of 3 loops technically, but each loop is made up of separate loops. So you start at the top of Mount Agamenticus in York, Maine, and you do a 3-mile loop that goes down Mount A, and then right back up to the top. So that's your first 3-mile loop. You pass the start finish line, and then you do another roughly 7-mile loop, which you go out over 2nd Hill and 3rd Hill, and then back to the top of Mount A.
When you come to an intersection, you've got to have your head up.
Jeff, this was his revenge race. So that was kind of actually the big, the theme for us was we were the support crew for Jeff to get through that race.
Last, I want to thank Rich Collins. Rich and I are the ones that have been putting this on for 8 years. It's a lot of work. And without Rich, we would have never been able to do this, and I really am thankful that I had a good partner. We're a good complement of the different things we're interested in and what we do for the race. Woo! The cookout is for everybody. We're not
8, 7, 6.
I was just talking to my wife last night actually about the first time that I ran 6 miles. I remember that time. I remember texting her and being like, I just ran 6 miles. And I started to think, maybe I could, get into some distance running. Maybe I could do this. And I think about a week later, I ran 8 miles. I came home from that saying, I'm never doing this. There's no way you're ever going to do anything else other than run 8 miles. This was the worst experience of your athletic life.
I think you can win this next. I looked at the course record. It was the same amount of time. But we got lost.
I signed up for the Big A 50K in spring of 2017, and let's just say that one did not go so well. The weather forecast leading up to that day was just torrential downpours all day, so it kind of got in my head. I knew the weather was going to be rough, and man, that morning it was 42 degrees and pouring.
Today, it's just so hard to carve out that much time.
And I got through the first, half of the race feeling all right, and then the cold really started to take over with me, and I started having GI issues, which really ended up being my downfall. Apparently that's my Achilles heel with distance running is GI issues. That was the first DNF on the resume. It was a tough day overall for a lot of reasons. I kind of went back to the Big A 50K in spring of 2018 as the response race. I teach high school English, and I talk to a lot of the kids about the response to failure, and so much of life is how do you respond to that.
He had a support system around him this time too, and I knew that Jeff wasn't gonna let this one beat him this time, no matter how long it took.
The great part about running with a group or a team is the camaraderie that you can build during that race. And I think because you don't have that pressure of time on you, and it's more about just finishing, you have the opportunity to really enjoy the people you're with and enjoy the scenery.
I felt as good as I've ever felt towing a start line at the beginning of this 2018 race. I had at that point about 4 months of just dedicated commitment to this one race in terms of how I was running, how I was taking care of my body, how I was cross-training and working out, and my nutrition, my sleep, and my mental preparation. I listened to a lot of Trail Runner Nation podcasts in those 4 months leading up, and I really felt like I was in a good spot mentally and physically to run that race.
So the course at Big A was really hilly and not at the same time. So it's, when you looked at the Strava afterwards, it was weird. You see all the ups and downs because you start at the top, you go all the way down, you come back up, there's a ring trail that kind of goes around the summit, and you get to there and run around, and then up and then down. So you were always on elevation, but for some reason it didn't feel that bad.
He's so clutch too. He plays so well in the fourth quarter. The moment's never too big.
My preference in terms of running is definitely running on trails over road races. The expectations you set for yourself are totally different. It just goes from being I need to meet a certain time to feel confident in what I'm doing or good about what I'm doing to I just want to finish and I want to feel good about the way I finish.
My favorite Celtic.
Thank you, how's it going?
Yeah, he's it's a fun dynamic because you know that in a long race like that, somebody's going to have a catastrophe.
Positionless basketball.
Right.
Right, well, they have so many tall threes too. Their threes are all 6'8", 6'9", 6'10".
But during loop 1, I felt great. It was one of the most memorable first loops of a race. I was running with my good buddy Nick, with Greg that I've now run with a few times. Their friend, I don't know if his first name is Sean or Patrick at this point, but the kid that I was calling Sean. Actually, it was only the second time I ever met him. The first time we met, we did a 20-mile trail run together.
I run 10 miles, it feels like a million times.
Running was kind of secondary. I always think when I'm in the beginning of a race, you never think about what you're doing. Because if you spend 31 miles thinking about running and running up that hill, man, it gets really hard.
Here the ascent start, right?
All right.
Yeah, I think this trail to the ring trail kind of sucks. Kind of get a little break and then that blueberry trail at the top.
When I really felt like I was becoming a runner was when I started putting down my music player or whatever, or listening to podcasts, and that really picked up for me when I started running in the woods, because I realized that it's much like skiing or hiking. Like, you can really enjoy where you are versus trying to avoid getting run over by something. This course was just rugged. It wasn't White Mountains rugged in the terms of being so craggy and you're having to scramble up different parts, or you're going 2,500 feet at a time up a pretty steep section. It was up and down, never more than a couple hundred feet, but it was up and down, and it was pretty rugged for a race that you could, quote, run the whole time. It was a pretty rugged race.
Thank you.
We ended up trying to run the downhills pretty quick and take our time on the ups to make sure that we could rest and recover for the rest of the race.
First 2 hours when we were running, we were just talking about the Boston Celtics and the Patriots and things like that. And there was a guy that was 3 feet in front of us, and he turned around at one point and he's like, I feel like I'm listening to talk radio. He's like, this is great.
This year, apparently they're not speed cover guys. Oh, beautiful. They're both so they're both gonna get burned on the wheel road. We've got Hightower, and then we've got Hightower, and then we got Hightower off the bench, right? Yeah.
There's people that we were running with that kind of just fell into the same pace as us, that we ended up striking up conversations with and learning a little bit about people that were off running 100-mile races and this was a training race, or just doing the 10-mile one lap for them was going to be a big deal and a huge accomplishment.
And the 2 liters of Coke. Love it.
We're going to hang out for a while.
Oh, can't drop the camera. Can't drop the camera. Can't drop the camera. Yeah. This is.
This one's got some hill. Remember I stood up and I was like, you can see my eyeball flat. Yeah, there's the thing.
You grab that? No, I'm good. I can take you up the hill if you want, are you? Yeah, man.
Coming into the Big A, I hadn't been feeling well that week, but as with most races for me, I had more confidence than I had training for some reason.
Well done.
This was going to be my 14th distance of marathon or further.
What is that?
I had 102 temperature 2 days before. I didn't really eat, I wasn't sleeping well. I started to get on the upside coming into that Saturday morning and felt okay, and was eating food and good. But then, yeah, the day of the race, that's when it all came down for me.
How's the stomach feeling?
Great, man.
Nice.
Hey, nice job.
Good job. That's right.
Yeah, Cindy!
Hey, you Cindy.
Cindy!
Nice job!
Woo!
Nice job!
As we were going through that first loop, I felt really good, but towards the end of it, so each loop was obviously just a little bit heavier than 10 miles. That's when I kind of knew that things were not going the right way for me, and it was just my energy. I just didn't have it in me to keep moving forward.
Thanks for saying.
Part of the reason that I started to realize where I was in comparison was how easy it was for everyone else at that point.
Go shot. Yeah.
I felt really good. I felt that that break after that first 10 miles made me feel like the next 10 was going to be definitely doable.
I knew starting loop 2 I wasn't finishing that race. I needed to run to really justify, because if I went to drop out then, you guys would have there's no way you would have let that happen. You would have dragged me out there. While I was struggling and kind of knew that I wasn't going to finish when I started loop 2, the definitive moment was after I took a hard fall at mile 15.
I was running right behind him when it happened. When he got up and he started grabbing at his shoulder, you knew that things were not going to be good for him.
So as I was falling, I went to put my hand down, and I have a bad shoulder in my right arm, so when I put it down, it pushed it back out of the socket, and when that happened, I kind of fell right onto my shoulder.
And I was like, dude, are you okay? And he said, I'm fine, just pop my shoulder out. And I think Sean and Greg and I were like, wait, you just what?
After that point, after the fall, I remember talking to the guys, and I was like, this is it for me, I'm not gonna finish. And I didn't want to hold them up anymore, and they really tried to say that they'd wait back and hold up with me, but
All right, we'll be right there.
Yeah.
As we left Nick and we started to ascend again back up to the top of Mount A, it became pretty clear that Jeff was starting to dip in terms of what he had left in him.
That's right.
Well done, guys.
Nice job.
Left or yeah, left.
Short roping.
1 mile we on, Sean. 24.
I'd always ended up with GI issues either at the very end of races or when I was finished. I'd use Tailwind nutrition for all my marathons and a lot of my endurance runs. Could it be the Tailwind? What was it? Because it happened during a couple of the marathons when I was trying to stick with it. So I got rid of the Tailwind. I went with just water and Noon Tabs. That was all I drank the whole race. I went kind of what I call my synthetic foods to start with. I had some gummies, I had a Cliff Bar, and then after that it was just all real food at the aid stations.
Yep.
I love the salted potatoes, the oranges, the watermelon, the strawberries, trying to have some pistachios and cashews and almonds. That was really what I went with from that point on during the race. To be honest, I felt pretty good up and through the first, 21 miles. I didn't have any stomach issues at all, and I'd followed my race nutrition plan to a T.
You need somebody in them.
And we went down Mount A and back to the top, and I was hurting at that point. So now we're at mile 24, our last time by the start-finish line. I had a little bit of food. I haven't thrown up yet. I'm struggling, but I feel like I'm okay.
Nice work, Jeff. Still moving, man.
Dude, 1 foot in front of the other.
You got it.
Grind City.
It's the name of the game. Go ahead. Why don't you lead for a little bit? Come on,
I feel fucking terrible.
You can do it, buddy.
I feel so bad.
You can do it, man.
You need some water? You want to take a break?
I think the first time I threw up was around mile 25-ish.
It'll make you feel better, hopefully.
He was so dead set on finishing this based on what had happened to him the year prior that anything we could do to get him there was gonna be necessary. You could tell that he was definitely digging with everything he had to get back up that mountain.
Woo. It's a nice milestone, Jeff.
Made it.
Nice work, bud.
I heard Nick use the phrase and some other runners use the phrase that I was in the death march. I knew I was having a hard time drinking water or noon or keeping any food down, and I knew that I still had 7 miles to go. I was running on empty a little bit. I knew I needed to intake calories if I was going to keep going. It was as bad as I've ever felt on if you could even call it a run at that point.
He started making some groaning noises that I have not heard a human male make previously. And I didn't feel like it would be a naturally occurring sound, and I wouldn't feel good about myself if I had left him.
I think you actually peeled a clementine for me at one point there. Sean maybe peeled the clementine for me.
Can you try to peel that for me?
Yeah.
And we were the furthest point out on the race course when these things started to unfold. Like, we were still 6 miles from the finish, and even if we had turned around and went back the way we'd come, we'd be 6 miles from the finish.
It's good, Jeff. Water's good.
It's like on that water.
At that point, it was not about time. It was just about, all right, let's finish. He was committed to finishing from the beginning. He was committed to finishing after the second lap.
Happy to be here with you. You do the same for us. We know that.
You barely stand up straight.
Let me know if you need me to take one of your arms.
Yeah, same here, exactly.
Let me know before you feel like you
Yeah.
way past that point.
Yep, I could each do an arm.
I knew I needed something, and then 15 minutes later, I'm throwing up whole pieces of clementine on the ground.
Oh, poor guy.
You are out in the middle of the woods, and you know, even though you're with other people, you have to be self-reliant to drag your body to civilization and to the finish line there.
We're gonna be like full frontal, baby.
We always talk about the trail running community, and I think a lot of times people think that that's, the people that you meet at these races from different states or different walks of life that you come in contact with on the trail. But for me, that's also you guys. For you guys to stick with me is kind of a powerful thing.
Okay, bud. Nice. It'll make you feel a little better, hopefully.
It wasn't about the time, it was finishing the race together as a group, and that was the more important part of the experience. And I never doubted that I was going to finish that race. I knew the time was not going to be pretty and the pace was not going to be pretty, but that I would eventually get to the end. The race, anything in life, never goes the way that you intend it to go. There's always different things that crop up and happen, and part of what I love about this sport is being able to adapt to those and persevere through those.
Family go to the top and
I've run enough races now. The ones I look back on with the most pride and tell stories about are not the ones that were the fastest. The race that I had to be most proud of it was Chicago in 2010 when it was 96 degrees and I finished an hour later than I thought I was going to.
Finishing it with Jeff was huge for the group and huge for me personally. Like, one, I'd never finished a 30-mile race before. I'd never finished a over marathon distance race before. So the finishing and the accomplishment of finishing felt great.
The way that it works is the finish line, while it's at the top of the hill, you kind of have to come up and over a field and then down into it. So we're standing there, we just kind of see the three heads moving like this fast, coming up over and their bodies starting to show. And
Last clearing.
To be able to make that happen and have him see that through back to his family, it was unbelievable.
I set out with one goal in mind, to finish the race, and I met my goal. I finished the race.
Nice job, Jeff.
we knew that Jeff was going to come into this finish line with a crash landing. Jeff just head down and he didn't even talk to us. No hi, no pleasantries, walks right by, through the finish line, straight over to his car where Samuel was, and like immediately to the ground. You earned it, man.
I had nothing left. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to eat. I didn't want to pick my head up.
Hit it.
All right.
When someone finishes like that, the first thing I think is the last 3 hours must have been fucking miserable for them. Like, you earned it, man. You finished. It's over.
You did it. Nice job, man. You did it. You did it.
What happened? What was going on?
Nausea. A lot of
Just having
nausea.
fun?
Yeah.
I felt terrible at the end of that race.
So now I'm just going to figure out when he's going to run next. So